Hello everybody, my name is Marshall Radwin. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect with AHEAD, based out of Chicago. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about DevOps and the transformation for people, process, and technology. This is going to be a little bit different. We're gonna cover a bunch of topics, but unlike most presentations that characterize themselves as deep dives, I'm going to characterize this as a shallow dive. There's an awful lot that goes into DevOps, and since I'm going to focus on more of the people and process for this presentation, I'm only going to cover some basic topics. So for me, one of the things that has been sort of interesting is I started out down this path probably about 4 years ago. I was put in charge of sort of developing some cloud services and trying to figure out how to do that for a pretty large organization that I used to work for. Started off like looking at, well, what are cloud practitioners like Netflix and AWS and Google, kind of like, what is that all about? And I looked in particular at some of the postings online and did a little reading about sort of what they were doing with respect to their business and how they were operating to try and be successful. Some of that was incredibly impressive. You look at the stuff that Netflix does, you look at the stuff that AWS does internally, and it is all I can say is it's impressive what they've accomplished. Then probably about a year after I started that, I read a book that was written that probably a lot of people are familiar with, called The Phoenix Project, and followed that up with a number of other reading materials, and was really kind of blown away. Like, up until that point, there's so much focus on the technology, and I had no idea how important the people and process aspects were. I mean, I did a lot of data center work, I did, worked around cloud, that kind of thing, but once I started, like reading through these books and understanding sort of the background, it really sort of opened my eyes to what aspects of DevOps are really important. What are the not only what's important, but how do you sort of gauge the significance of what aspects of DevOps? I get questions all the time as a consultant from my customers like, well, how do you do DevOps? Everybody wants to focus on the technology, like, well, we do Puppet. Well, yeah, Puppet is certainly an influential contributor to the DevOps movement, but the tool itself is not DevOps. Chef, any of those, the tools are not DevOps. It's really about a much larger sort of environment and cultural aspect for organizations that needs to be considered. So starting off, and this is actually a great definition right from AWS. What is DevOps? Like I said, DevOps isn't characterized by tools, it's characterized sort of by a broader spectrum of philosophies and practices, the people, the process that drive the technology. The technology is just a means to an end. So DevOps is a combination of cultural philosophies, practices, and tools that increases an organization's ability to deliver applications and services at high velocity. So think about sort of how that impacts the business. You'll notice that it mentions applications. A lot of people that might work in infrastructure or in other areas of IT might think, well, this is specific to development or specific to operations, but it's really relevant to all aspects of IT. And if you think about how business operates today, whether it's in the cloud or in the data center, all of the principles that DevOps captures are relevant to all aspects of how we manage our environments. The term DevOps was coined by accident by Patrick Dubois in 2009, where he was living in Belgium. He had gone to a Velocity conference and was so impressed with what he saw or what he heard that he decided to start what's known as DevOps Days. And that was really where the term DevOps originated. DevOps is the outcome of applying trusted principles from domain of physical manufacturing to the IT value stream. So the value stream is sort of this term that is, I don't think, commonly used in IT, at least not outside of sort of application development or the development environment, but it is an important part of how we do our work. As I said, its origins are the physical manufacturing domain. DevOps extrapolates those principles and applies them to the technology context. So the manufacturing value stream was characterized and is characterized by a few things. One of the fundamental concepts, as I said, comes from lean manufacturing, which is the value stream as I described. The value stream is defined as a sequence of activities an organization takes to deliver upon customer request. In manufacturing, the value stream is usually easy to see. This is important because it has a direct correlation to what makes IT value streams difficult, because, as I'll show in the next slide, they're not visible. So in manufacturing, you have a request from a customer that comes in, right, for something, and then raw materials are put onto the manufacturing floor, and then everybody can watch the flow of the material as it goes through the process. In IT, that doesn't work quite the same. In addition, the whole idea behind the manufacturing value stream, again, this is going back to lean principles, is to have fast and predictable lead times that rely on a relentless focus on creating a smooth and even flow of work, right? So the idea is, if you think about multiple stages of something going through a flow, not having bottlenecks, and being able to see if there is a bottleneck, where it is, what's causing it, those types of things. The technology value stream has a lot of similarities, but there are some key differences. Much like the manufacturing value stream, it's defined as a process to convert a business hypothesis into a technology-enabled service that delivers value to the customer. Sounds pretty similar. It commonly follows an agile or iterative process to turn a hypothesis into a feature specification or capability, right? So feature request, new version, what have you, that's all relative and commonly has agile or iterative process applied to it. However, until those services or features or what have you are put into production, they don't have any value. So it's really important for those to get into production, right? We all have probably been in IT for a long time, and you look at traditional waterfall methodology, and some of that can lead to years-long deployment cycles, which leads to a bunch of different kinds of issues. I won't be able to spend a lot of time getting into that, again, shallow dive, but ultimately the value is created by getting features or services into production quickly and predictably. So as I said, one of the most significant, I guess, pieces of work or pieces of work that I became aware of were revealed in the Phoenix Project, and then further in a variety of other books that were written by Gene Kim and IT Revolution and their team. And there's quite a few. The research they've done is pretty compelling. So what was revealed in the Phoenix Project is something that they refer to as the 3 ways. So the first way, just to go over that, is to enable fast flow of work left to right, starting with development, going to operations, and ultimately then being delivered to the customer. Again, we're talking about what? Value stream. So the key components for the first way are, number 1, make the work visible. Again, like we talked about in physical manufacturing, work is easy to see as part of the value stream. In IT, it's not. So we all know we work in environments where you ask, well, are things getting done? And the answer often is, well, no, I didn't. Well, why not? Well, because I have all this stuff. All of what stuff? So another aspect of this is to reduce batch sizes and intervals, right? So if we break down the workflow into smaller chunks, it lends itself to a variety of positive benefits that I'll touch on in a little bit. Ultimately, it keeps it so that each, whether it's a change or an update, whatever it is, manageable and easy to gain telemetry on and to analyze and to potentially ensure that it's a quality release, whether it's software or some other kind of change. And the idea is, by doing that, we ensure that defects or problems don't get passed to downstream work centers. Something that I found particularly interesting reading like the Phoenix Project had to do with security. For anybody who's read the book, there were some revealing aspects towards the end where there was a determination that if you do what's, I think, commonly now phrased secure by design, if you build security in just like you do with quality and everything else at the beginning of the process or the workflow, chances are you're not going to have to do excessive amounts of change to satisfy security or compliance when you get to the end, which is a much more costly endeavor. And last but not least, the first way directs us to constantly optimize for global organizational goals, right? So one of the things I'll talk about has to do with that in particular here in a couple minutes. Second way, establish a fast and constant flow of feedback at all stages of the value stream. This is right to left, so this is reverse. This has to do with what they term failing fast. This also has to do with, this also is affected by batch size and frequency. If you have small batch sizes, it's much easier to see if there is a problem, and it's much easier to remediate problems at an early stage versus once they get further down the value stream. So, and again, the goal is to find ways to enable faster detection and recovery from problems. That's part of the second way. And then last but not least for the second way is, by doing this, you increase or maximize the opportunity for your organization to learn and improve. One of the things that happens in, I'll say, legacy or traditional IT is that when there's a lot of siloing of knowledge, there's a tendency for the same kinds of problems to repeat themselves. So the goal here is to break that down, make it easy to digest, easy to address, easy to remediate, so you can increase speed. Third way, create a generative, which is a performance-based, high-trust culture. This is maybe the hardest part of all. And I actually have a slide that's not included in this that talks about different organizational cultures. And it's really represented by those organizations, some of those that I referred to earlier in the presentation. You look at what Netflix does, what happened at Flickr, Etsy, AWS, and they model the third way pretty prominently, pretty visibly throughout the industry, and that's pretty well known. The thing is, organizations, IT organizations really need to now take notice of that, because it's the only way that an organization is going to be able to remain competitive. It supports dynamic, disciplined, scientific approach to experimentation and risk-taking. A lot of people would think risk-taking, or experimentation, But if you think about how that gets applied, you look at small batch sizes, you look at the frequency, the impact. A perfect example that I use with a lot of people is, if you look at your cell phone and all the applications that you have on there, how often are the applications being updated? I have some that get updated like twice a day, and I just update it. I don't care, because it almost never causes a problem, because they're making very small changes. If there's a problem, it's very easy to back out. But you learn more quickly by that type of a process than you do by trying to build in large amounts of change and then figuring out what broke at the end. So that goes to the third point, which is that the knowledge that's gained through the process of doing that, and by having a culture that tolerates or even embraces operating that way, creates a system ultimately that tolerates risk much more readily. And in the end, the part that's most important is the organization as a whole learns more quickly, which leads to a competitive business advantage, which for a lot of people, it sounds like marketing spiel, but it's true. If you look at organizations that are succeeding, again, I point to all the organizations, you look at how quickly AWS is growing and its impact on really public cloud. Not that Google or Microsoft haven't had their impact, but honestly, if you think about it, somebody, like AWS has been extremely influential, even in private cloud. They've driven a lot of what's taking place inside the data center, just because of the way they've modeled what they do. So one of the things that is sort of difficult to understand, I think, for organizations is, there's a lot of stuff about the mechanics, there's a lot of stuff about technology relating to DevOps, but how do you sort of characterize or how do you determine whether you're actually accomplishing anything, right? You can say, oh, well, we have this new tool in place and allows us to go, 3 times faster or whatever. That's okay. But ultimately, a lot of this is driven, at least in sort of at the executive level, by the modeling of how the organization is progressing. There's 2 different kinds of models that are pretty typical. You've got a maturity model, and then you've got a capability model. And maturity models have been the most prevalent, at least, if you're on the internet, you're looking for sort of how do you understand where an organization is in their journey, to be cliche about that. Maturity models are the most common, and even from like some of the cloud practitioners, they're still referring to maturity models. The problem is that maturity models typically represent the different stages of maturity as a final destination, not an ongoing learning experience. So if you say, well, we've reached level 3 and we can do X, Y, and we do X, Y, and Z, that suggests that you'll always be there. This is a problem because we know that the business landscape, the technology landscape are super dynamic, and so they're always changing. What was a level 3 or a level 4 today may not be that in a year, right? That might fall back to even to a 2 or a 1 because of the way the industry and the business changes, the requirements for that. So what's generally advocated is to use capability models. They're designed to help the organization improve and progress all the time, and they usually are taking into account sort of the dynamic nature of the technology and business landscapes. Ultimately, the reason that the capability model is the effective way to the more appropriate model to use is because it embodies the continuous improvement paradigm. All right, so I'll wrap it up. I don't know how much more time we have. There's no question DevOps has benefits. Some of them vary, from one organization to another, from one team to another. But in the end, it provides speed, right? So move at a higher velocity so you can innovate for customers faster, adapt to changing markets better, grow more efficient at driving business results. Rapid delivery, increase the frequency and pace of releases so you can innovate and improve on your product faster. I don't think that there's any question that if you can move more quickly and still provide quality, then you're going to end up with a strategic business advantage in the marketplace. But you have to make sure the reliability is still there, right? It doesn't, like a lot of organizations, during the course of some of the studying I've done, they try to go faster, so they just focus on going faster releases. The problem is that they don't do it reliably, and so it basically creates chaos in the value stream that they have. And in those cases, which are not uncommon, what you see a lot of times is that they revert back to their old practices, and so they lose whatever advantage they might have gained. Build for scale. Operate and manage infrastructure, development, applications, whatever, and the processes that support them to support scalability. Some of the things that affect this, obviously, are automation. Without going into a long explanation, there are some people that think DevOps is a continuation of Agile, and there's some truth to that. DevOps tends to use Agile methodologies, but it is not just Agile. There's so much more that goes into it. The benefits of using automation, obviously, consistency, improved security, ability to support the speed and increased delivery timelines. If it's done properly, will improve collaboration between teams. I work with a lot of customers that have very siloed teams. It's a huge frustration for everybody. Those are the kinds of things, the silo walls have to come down if DevOps is going to be successful. If you do that though, the improved collaboration pretty much always results in improved outcomes. And as I mentioned before, security is maybe today one of the most important aspects. It's great to go fast. It's great for your whatever you're delivering to be reliable. But ultimately, if you think about it, and really security is kind of part of reliability. But if you are not building security in and ensuring that you are maintaining security with your application, it won't matter how good you are for very long. All right, that's what I've got. Again, like I said, shallow dive. There's any number of tangents that I could talk about on this topic for hours probably. Anybody have any questions?
What's the most common mistake people make and that leads to failure? So repeat the question.
Sorry. So the question is, what's the most common mistake that people make that leads to failure with DevOps? I don't know that I would say that there's exactly one, but I would say that one of the most common is that people, again, one of two things. They assume that because they're using DevOps tools, things like Puppet or Chef or Ansible or any number of other tooling aspects, that constitutes doing DevOps. And they completely ignore the people in the process. I worked with a customer a couple of years ago, a really large one, and they said, oh yeah, we've got all of the, we've got all the tools. We've got the VMware, we've got Puppet, we've got any number of things. We've even, gone through reading the Phoenix project. They had, I think they had John Willis even come in and spend a week with them. And they were forming a new cloud center of excellence, but they couldn't figure out what they needed to do. And so we started talking about it, and I said, so what's the CIO think? Well, he says that he understands. I said, he understands. And then we spent the next 2.5 days going through all of the stuff that was completely broken because the CIO didn't ensure that the culture and the processes across teams were enforced. And so they were pretty much, they spent millions and millions and millions of dollars on tooling, and their individual team got it, but nobody else did. Any other questions? Yeah.
Outside of the Phoenix Project, DevOps Handbook, is there any other books that you would recommend to read on this topic?
Sure. So the question is, outside of Phoenix Project and DevOps Handbook, are there any other books that I would recommend? Yeah, actually, there's a couple. So the Phoenix Project was actually inspired by a book written by a fellow by the name of Eliyahu Goldratt. The book is called The Goal, and it was actually written in the 80s and was kind of influential in the same way that the Phoenix Project's been influential in DevOps. That was an influential piece of work for lean manufacturing. So I would highly recommend that. There's a lot of similarities in the way the book is written. It's sort of a novel format, easy to digest like the Phoenix Project, but the principles and sort of the storyline that leads you to the answers for how that go are really, I thought they were pretty inspiring, particularly the topic of the theory of constraints, which is all about workflow. Another one that I'm actually not done with, but that was also written by several of the folks in IT Revolution, is called Accelerate, which is a great. It's a little more. It's a lot more academic in that they go through all of the research that they did. They show how they did the research to come to the conclusions that they did, but it completely backs up almost all of the hypotheses that they had when they were developing the Phoenix project and other aspects of DevOps. Anything else? Any other questions people have? Okay.
Also,
Oh.
book recommendation, there's Lean Enterprise.
Yes.
Lean Startups.
Some others that I haven't read but are highly recommended have to do with Toyota Kata. And then I'm drawing a blank on the name. There's another book that is written, I believe, by a woman that is all about making work in progress visible, and she was very influential in making Kanban prominent as part of the DevOps movement.
Just to add to, if anybody's looking for like free Kanban-like tools, one of the best ones I've seen out there is called Kanban.net. It's a free, you can actually load it up as a container now, but it's a very nice Kanban board that you can use. And you also have Kanban boards built into Visual Studio Code now, so you can have individual boards for all your coding projects.
Sure, private version of Jira sort of thing. The only thing I would say about this, and this is just my personal opinion, while those can all be effective tools, like IT's work in progress, sometimes those are not as visible as you might want, which is one of the reasons why traditional Kanban boards became so popular. Is it's a physical board. You have to, I mean, you see it, you put it up either in the department or for the team or whatever. So if you're going to use a digital version, the only thing I would say is make sure that it is visible. A lot of times, organizations will put up large screen TV, or not TVs, but monitors where they have all that stuff posted up.
It's kind of magical too, like it guilts you into actually making sure that you're making progress on things and
Well,
every day.
yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is for leadership. Leadership is almost always getting pressure from above to do stuff. And if they're not, like, they may know that there's a lot of work going on or that there's a lot of work in the queue, but there's something psychological about actually seeing the work that sort of changes how you manage. Like, if you just go to your board or to another leader and you say, well, we're really busy. Well, that's not meaningful, right? If you can say, we've got these 27 projects or these 27 features that people are working on, and we've got 3 people and they can only do this many in this amount of time, that's much more meaningful. It puts it into context. Anything else? Any other questions?
Thanks, Mark.
All right. Thanks, everybody.